We are in the book of Ecclesiastes. That's our summer series. If you have the church app, it's actually, the outline is there for you. So we have digital outlines as well, and we have physical ones. You can follow along your Bible, with your Bible. Now, we're going to go through chapters 1 and 2 today. I did the first section of chapter 1 last week, but we're going to start from verse 12 in chapter 1. So as you get your Bible open, let me just give you a few introductory comments. The first is this. Solomon starts moving. He's the author of Ecclesiastes. He starts moving into what we call personal experience. So the first section of chapter 1 is really about general observations about human life and about nature. And then he goes, okay, I want to share something from my heart to you. This is not a theory. This is not a prediction. This is an experience that I lived. You get the sense that he's an older, wiser Solomon giving you his wisdom, and he wants you to learn from this. Do what I say, not what I did, is the prevailing theme in Ecclesiastes. And here's what Solomon learns. He says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens, under the sun. What a heavy burden God has laid on humanity. I have seen all things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing the wind. Solomon says, I've done everything imaginable. And it's chasing the wind. It's meaningless. It's a vapor. It's a mist. I mean, if you went outside and you found someone chasing after wind frantically, you would say, this person needs some help. We need to get this person help. And yet Solomon says this of humanity. He says, we are chasing the wind. He says, I've studied all there is to study. I'm a wise person. I've also tried every kind of pleasurable experience out there, every kind of folly. I've tried it. And yet, here's my conclusion. It's a burden. It's chasing the wind. It's chasing after bubbles. It's grasping at the mist. It's vapor. I've done it all. I've seen it all. And I've come back empty. Now, last week, I preached this kind of sermon. And some people came up to me after and said, Pastor, that was very depressing. And someone said, well, where's the joy in all this? And I said, look, the joy will come, but you need to give it some time. You need to think about it. I mean, if you go to a doctor, you want a correct diagnosis. You want a full, not sugar-coated kind of diagnosis. You don't want the doctor to come back to you and say, well, there's some bad news, but I'm not really going to give it to you. I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about what's going on. You say, no, doctor, just give it to me full so that I know what to do. I have the proper treatment. Just tell me to me and my family straight up. You'll say that. See, before you accept treatment, you need to know how really sick you are. And I believe that's what Solomon is trying to do here. If you look at verse 15, he says, what is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. This word crooked, if you focus it on it for a sec, it's really this idea of brokenness and sin in wisdom literature. And what Solomon is saying is the world is broken, it's messy, it's fractured. And because sin has invaded our world, you and I sin. And what sin does is it has a ripple effect on humanity. And so nothing works the way God intended it to work. And humanity knows that. And so it's stuck in the cycle where we know things are broken, we try to fix them, only to be left with more brokenness and then utter frustration. And that's what Solomon's point is. He's saying, look, you can turn to possessions, you can turn to popularity, you can turn to pleasures, you can turn to relationships, you can even turn to religious rituals, but it's going to be futile in the end. Anything under the sun is going to be futile. And what you notice in Ecclesiastes, as you read this book, there are two themes that come out. Number one, Solomon says, I live the right way. I pursued wisdom. Remember that story, God asked Solomon, what do you want? Solomon says, I want wisdom. So he lived the right way. He was a wise man. Yet, Solomon also lived the wrong way. He went the other extreme. He did a lot of foolish things. And at the end of his life, his kingdom was split in half. But he says, either way, you're chasing the wind. Either way has brought me no lasting joy. I've come up empty on both ends. Wisdom literature is so interesting because it gives you such a different perspective on life. If you flip back a few books to Job, this was not written by Solomon, but it's part of wisdom literature. Now, some of us come out with Job come out of Job, if you read Job, you come out of it, you think, okay, the moral of Job is that God actually gave him better things at the end of his life than the former part of his life. In fact, if you scroll through Job at the very end, in verse 42, it says, the Lord blessed Job, latter part of his life, more than the former part. And some of us can think of this. We think the moral is, God is actually going to bless Job, and therefore, when I get good things in my life, therefore, my life will be good and happy. But Ecclesiastes actually turns this notion on its head, because Ecclesiastes says, here's a guy who had it all, and his life wasn't better. He had it all. And Solomon talks about this throughout this book, and that's what we're going to analyze this morning. Now, you've heard of the American dream. You know, that phrase, the American dream, people pursue the American dream. I don't know totally what the American dream is. I can imagine what it is, because I live more of like the Asian dream, or the Asian Canadian, or the Asian American dream. Okay, my dream is not exactly the American dream. And I'm sure there are differences in those types of dreams. I mean, in Asian communities primarily, there's a communal undergirding that makes you want to bring honor to your family, and there's, in the Asian context, is you're an immigrant, or you come from an immigrant family, and so they're a minority culture. So part of your dream is that. But I would say in general, people's dreams are like this. You want to raise kids that have good morals, or you want to have good morals. You want to have a good education. You want to go to a good university. After that, you want a good, steady job. And then what happens after that? Well, your parents will tell you, you want a beautiful spouse, right? Not just a good spouse, that's good, but a beautiful one. A good spouse, a beautiful spouse, a solid spouse. Then you want a beautiful home. Then you want to produce beautiful, smart, good children. And then you want to continue doing your steady job, and then you want a nice retirement. And after retirement, I would say the dream is to have your beautiful children have beautiful grandchildren, so you can go on a beautiful vacation with them. I mean, that's sort of, if you think about it, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but think about it, that's how implicitly I've been told this is kind of life. This is what you should aim for in life. And the assumption, whether it's American dream or the Asian American dream, is that if I had these things in my life in a certain order, or maybe it's a little bit out of order, but it's in a certain order, my life will be good and complete and satisfied, and I'm going to have said to live a meaningful life. Now, there's nothing wrong with all these things I just listed, okay? But let's do some reflecting here, and I want to think about this with you, because I believe there was a point when each of us prayed to God for those things. Some of us probably dropped to our knees and prayed to God and begged God for those things which now we probably take for granted. You may even have more than what you prayed for. Most of us do. You make more money than you ever wanted, or you have a bigger house than you ever planned, or you go on more vacations than you ever dreamed of. But Solomon's point is, you're still chasing the next thing. You're longing for the next thing. Nothing has really satisfied you because you keep on looking in the distance. And for some, maybe you're on the other extreme. Your dream was not fulfilled. You don't have all those things I listed. You don't have that dream job or dream home or dream children or dream vacations. So you totally understand what Solomon's talking about. See, the whole idea here is whether you live in the Asian dream or the American dream or Asian American dream or anything in between, Solomon says it's futile because spiritual longings, the heart issues, are not satisfied by earthly achievements. That's his point. By circumstances, by things that you can control. I mean, they are satisfied to a degree, but the deep satisfaction people are longing for, they're not satisfied by those things. And what chapter 2 does is it lists specific examples from Solomon's life to illustrate the point. He goes into really honest, raw truth here. And he says, look, I know some of you guys are thinking that if I just had a little bit more, if you had my life, if you had Solomon's life, if you had the money, the power, the sex, the freedom, you'd be happy. And in fact, you're probably thinking, if I traded places with Solomon, I probably wouldn't mess it up to the degree he did. And Solomon's point is, no, you would. You would mess it up. You'd be in the exact same place if you were given the exact same circumstances and situations. And that's what this book is such a powerful book. I mean, some people are saying, well, why are you preaching this for a summer series? We thought the summer series kind of like lighthearted. But I think it gives us a break in the summer to think about our lives. And what Solomon's point here is, what he's trying to do, and we have some, balloons on stage, is really he's trying to burst some bubbles for us. He's trying to, I'm not going to do it for you, okay, because Some of you have bubble phobia, so I don't want to burst it. But effectively, he's trying to burst some bubbles for us, some balloons that are really burstable. That's the point. So what I want to do this morning is go through 3 bubbles that he talks about. I call them bubbles. You can call them whatever you want. But 3 things that Solomon says actually are fleeting, even though you pursue them and you relentlessly pursue them. First bubble is this: pleasure. Pleasure. These are the first 11 verses of chapter 2. He says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Now, what's interesting here is Solomon already was a wise person. It wasn't like he tried pleasure and then he went to wisdom. He was already wise. He explored everything and he studied and he was educated. And he said, you know what, that didn't satisfy me. So you know what, I'm going to go the opposite route. I'm going to go try to do everything pleasurable under the sun. He says to test pleasure to find out what's good. But then his conclusion is the same. It also proved to be meaningless. Some of us think, well, if this is all there is to life, there's no afterlife, then I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'll simply live life to its fullest, the way I think. I will live only once mentality, and I'll just keep going. And regardless of consequences, I will drive to that. And Solomon says, look, you can try, but this is what's going to happen. It's going to end up the same way. And he lists a few things. Look at what he says. He says in verse 2, he said, laughter is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? He says you can go and look up YouTube videos and share them, and they're funny. You can go on Instagram accounts and share the cutest, funniest, dumbest things and laugh at it and be entertained. And before you go to bed, you're on YouTube searching for goofy things your friend sends you, and then you share it and you enjoy it. And it's a cute little puppy playing with a lion, or a guy playing video games for 2 hours and doing funny commentary about it. Whatever it is. He said you can entertain your mind with funny things. But he says it's just a distraction. It's meaningless at the end of the day. He says in verse 3, I've tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. He says, look, I've tried alcohol. I've tried to drink the best wine out there and enjoy it and enjoy food and all these things. And I'll let the alcohol run its course and do what it wants to me, and I'll embrace folly. He says, verse 4, he says, I undertook great projects. Some of you say, well, I'm not into that stuff you just talked about. But Solomon says, look, I've done this too. I've undertaken great projects, exciting projects, architecture, engineering. They say that the pools of Solomon are still in Israel today, and you can still go find them. That has how good his engineering was. They're marvels of the ancient world. He says you can be disciplined, and you can goal set, and you can be this workhorse. But he says, where does that leave you? He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I know some of us are into gardening. I'm not really into it. I just want the weeds to be gone. But some of us have these. My next door neighbor has won the Thornhill Award for best lawn or whatever. It makes me look terrible. He says, I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. He said, I had the best gardens, ever. And yet, I was left empty. Then he launches into what most of us can probably relate to. He amassed things. He bought things. In fact, in those days, you could buy people. He bought slaves to serve him. He owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. He says, anything. I acquired male and female singers and harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. You know, Solomon had a lot of wealth. I mean, he really had anything he wanted. They estimate his wealth in today's standards to be over $2 trillion. And you say, how can anybody have that much money? And they've done calculations with, they say that Solomon amassed 25 tons of gold per year for 40 years. That alone is in the billions of dollars. And then he had taxation, and he had trade, and he had everything under the sun. And he was by far, in the history of the world, one of the top 5 richest people to ever live. Right? He had everything. He had enough silver, by the way, that it was treated like rocks in his day because there was so much. Nobody really valued it because he had so much silver in Jerusalem. And Solomon, yet, he said this in verse 10. He says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. And verse 11, yet I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had told him to achieve. And he says, everything was meaningless. It's chasing after wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. He says it's diminishing returns. It's pointless. I think all of us look at a celebrity or a famous person or a wealthy person, and we admire them, and we think this way. We think, well, if I had only a little bit of their life, I think I'd be pretty good. I think I'd be happy. We look at their fame, their fortune, the meals they eat, the friends they associate with, and we say, oh man, I wish I had a little bit of that. Just a little bit, and I'd be happy. And here's Solomon. He says, I was rich, I was powerful, I had the best homes, the most stuff, the finest food, I hosted the most lavish parties, I had the greenest lawn, I had the most followers, and yet I am empty inside. It's fleeting. And I want to just tell you, there's a glimmer of hope, by the way. This is sort of a by-the-way kind of comment, because if Solomon actually came to the opposite conclusion at the end of the book, I think you and I would be depressed. Because the opposite conclusion is, if you have those things, you'd be happy. So most of us, probably none of us, can relate to that. So technically, we'd never be happy. But Solomon actually comes to a conclusion that probably gives us hope, which is you shouldn't put your happiness into those things. I want to clear up one thing, though. Solomon is not saying pleasure is bad or evil, right? Art, music, comedy, creativity can be good things. So you should enjoy them. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But what he's saying is that you should not let them be your final destination. That's what he's saying. When good things become ultimate things, that changes the relationship you have with those things. They're no longer things that you use to serve you and other people. They become your master. And when they're your master, you are their slave. And I would say here's the most dangerous part of this entire thing. The reason, now listen to my words very carefully. The reason something good becoming something ultimate, how does something good become something ultimate? The reason it does is because it does satisfy you to a degree. And that's why you keep on going back to it. If it didn't satisfy you, you would never go back to it. But it does satisfy you to a degree. Now, if you live life long enough where you've really thought through it and you're wise, deep down inside you know that those things that are in your heart probably don't give you the joy and the peace and the purpose that you so long for. The feelings that are associated with those things don't actually last. But if you have no alternative, it is literally all you got. And so you're left to a place where you are going to those things, back to those things constantly because they give you some degree of satisfaction. And what happens, here's the dangerous part, is you keep going after those things. They just actually become distractions to you. And what you're doing is you pursue these pleasurable things as a means to numb the pain in your heart. And I think that's the most dangerous part. It's not so much that you achieve, you're so totally satisfied with those things. You just never are. And they become a distraction. You numb the pain, and you don't want to ask the harder questions of life. You just keep going back to these things. And they could be a variety of things, right? Entertainment. There's another word for entertainment. It's called amusement. Amusement means I don't think about it. I don't want to think about it. We amuse ourselves with so many different things that we're just numbing the pain of reality. And Solomon just wants to hit us in the face with this truth. And he says, don't do that. You're not doing yourself any good by doing that. So he says, first of all, pleasure is meaningless. Then he goes back to his original bubble, I would say, which is wisdom, what he started his life with. And he goes, okay, let me tell you, though, wisdom is also meaningless. He says in verse 12, then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? He's basically saying, I was the wisest, smartest guy out there. What is my son going to do that's going to top what I did? Really nothing. He said, I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. Now, hear his words here, and I'm showing you that there's something really important. He says wisdom is actually better than folly. Okay, so he says, okay, I lived this foolish life. That was not good. Okay, that was terrible. Wisdom is better. You should live a wiser life. I mean, look at verse 12 and 13. That's what he says, right? It's better. It's better to be in the light than in darkness. It's better to plan ahead than to procrastinate. It's better to listen before you speak. It's always generally better to do that. It's better to avoid hard conversations with your spouse than try to bring up something that is difficult to bring up right before they go to bed. Or maybe the opposite way, you're hangry. It's just not a good idea to bring up stuff that There's wiser things to do than to do that. I think wisdom allows you to avoid pitfalls in your life that will just make your life harder. So Solomon is actually saying wisdom is important, but the value is relative. That's the key. The value is relative. Wisdom is better than folly, but here's what he says. Look in verse 14. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in darkness. Okay, so he says wisdom is better, but I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. He says, at the end of the day, though, whether you're wise or whether you're foolish, you end up with the same destiny. You go to the same burial plot, so to speak. And it's kind of crass to say that, but here's your burial plot, and it says, this guy was wise. Right beside you is a guy who says, this guy was a fool. But they're in the same burial plot. That's what Solomon is saying. It's a great equalizer. So what he's trying to imply is this. What is the point of learning to be wise if this world is all there is and we end up in the same destination anyways? Now that's pretty grim. But he actually goes in further. He says, even if you're the wisest person on the planet and people talk about your wisdom for ages to come, he says, your legacy will not last. He says in verse 15, then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will also overtake me also. Then what then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. Like the fool, the wise too must die. I mean, this is a kind of grim picture. Solomon is saying, look, the wisdom can only take you so far. And I would add this. In a perfect world, wisdom actually leads you to success, right? It should, always. But the problem is the world is busted. The world is not perfect. It's broken. And if you don't believe me, think about how many times you do the right thing and you do the wise thing, and yet someone who has done the complete opposite gets ahead of you in life. I mean, we all have that one friend that has done that, yeah? I mean, I had a friend in university who like, I don't want to discredit him too much, but he wasn't really known for his grades, shall we put it that way? He wasn't known for his grades. I was the studious one in our house. But he's an oral surgeon today. And he makes a lot of money. And yet, when I imagine myself going to his dental clinic and sitting in the chair, and as he's about to put me under, I say to him, do you remember the time you got 55 in biochemistry? Like, are we still, did you improve from that? Like, because you might kill me, Like, you see what I'm saying? We have that friend. There is a generation that proves this to be true. They're called YouTube influencers. YouTube influencers, yeah, or Instagram influencers. These are people who have done the complete opposite of what you've taught your children and toiled for. My son told me he wants to be a YouTube guy. I said, no, I said these words, that's foolish. That's not wise to do that. You need to have an education. You better have an education. Like, you see what I'm saying? And yet there are people that, he says to me, well, there's the people that they just do YouTube and they make like $2 million a year. And so when you say, oh, there's not for everybody. Yeah, but it did happen for some people. But you see what I'm saying? Wisdom is human wisdom we're talking about. And so Solomon says it's fleeting. Even the wisest among us could be wrong. And there's a injustice in the universe that balances that out, right? It doesn't always work that way. So he says that's a bubble. That bubble is about to pop. Now, the last thing I will say is, hopefully it doesn't anger some of you, but the last thing, because it's from God's word, okay? But he says toil is meaningless. So the third bubble I want to talk about is this. It's not just pleasure, it's not just wisdom, but work is meaningless. Work is meaningless. This is an issue that hits very close to our hearts, right? And by the way, don't go back home and say, well, Pastor Ho-Ming said quit school. I'm going to quit my job, honey. Let me give it to you in context. Look at verse 17 to 21. He says, so I hated life. Solomon says, I hate life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless. It's chasing after wind. I hated all things I had toiled for under the sun. And what does he say? Because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. Now that's a scary thought. Okay, because what he's saying is, look, you could work really hard and control as much as you can your circumstances, okay? You can amass a fortune. You can have this great legacy. But there is a great equalizer. It's called death. And when you die, all that goes to the church, right? No. Okay. I hope that's another sermon. But it goes to, for most of us, our children or someone you love, okay? But who knows? Statistics actually say, in most cases, inherited wealth is spent by the next generation. So everything you've possibly done with your life, and you saved all this money, it goes to someone who Solomon says could either be wise or could be a fool with your money, with everything you earned. Now, what is Solomon really saying? He's saying, look, that's a practical consideration. He's not saying to quit your job and be lazy. Obviously, he was not a lazy person. He did so many things. He's saying this, if work is your ultimate thing, you're in trouble. And for many of us, it is. We define ourselves by our work, what we do, how hard we work, how much we make. And Solomon actually says at the end of the section, the problem is, if you equate work with your worth, it becomes exhausting. He says in verse 22, look what it says. Now, I'm jumping down a little bit. You can read the rest. He just basically continues to say, it's really not a good thing when you leave it to the next generation. But he says, what do people get from all their toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. And Solomon is saying this. He said, when something becomes ultimate, it becomes your master. And when you serve a master that is relentless like that, it's exhausting. It's tiresome. And you're never going to please this master. You can't rest because you need to work hard to keep what this master promises you that never gives you. I mean, how many of us go home and our bodies are physically out of the office, but your mind is still there? I mean, you're checking your texts, your messages before you go to bed. When you get up in the morning, you're checking your texts and your messages, and you're just not that restful. You're always worrying. You're always thinking about the next thing you got to do. Now, I'm not saying all of us work for fame and fortune. Most of us probably don't. But the temptation in our culture is really to put your worth in your work. Right? And so that's why it can be a very terrifying thing when you don't have something to do. But Solomon says, look, if you put everything into what you do, it's worthless. It's futile. It'll leave you restless and empty. Now, I've painted a very bleak picture for you, and I hope we don't leave there. Okay, but let me just pause and just let it sink in. Let it sink in. Because all of us have on stage some balloons, yeah? I don't want to label it and make it cheesy, because every one of you has a different kind of balloon, okay? Now, for some it's those general categories of pleasure, work, and wisdom. But you could throw in anything in there. You could think your balloon could be relationships. Your balloon could be social status. Your balloon can be your bank account. Your balloon can be your comfort, leisure. Your balloon could be hobbies. Your balloon could be anything. But the point is, it's fleeting. It's a balloon for a reason. That helium is going to come out of that balloon very soon, right? Or if that helium doesn't come out, a pin's going to hit it, and the whole thing's going to pop. And now what are you left with? And I would say this. Let me just say that if you come out of this right now, and you just feel this, that there is this like dreadful feeling that you have in your heart, I think Solomon has achieved his goal. Because Solomon wants you to embrace the fleeting nature of a crooked world in order for your heart to long for more. Because if you just left it at this, you would just come out thinking, okay, there's nothing. I mean, I really have nothing. Your heart actually longs for more when you realize the depravity of the situation you're in, the crookedness of your life. Then you say, I mean, the way I would put it is this. If you go back to verse 15, Solomon says, what is crooked cannot be straightened. Well, my point is this. How do you make something crooked straight again? Because something's crooked, it's broken, it's fractured. Well, if that's all there is, then there's no hope. But how do you make the crooked straight again? And here's what Solomon says. Look at verse 24 to 26. Here's the conclusion. Now, this is really deep stuff, but Solomon wrote it. In his wisdom, he wrote it. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This, too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat and find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom and knowledge and happiness, but to the sinner he gives the task of gathering up and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I want you to look at 25 for a sec. It says, it's really important here. This too I see is from the hand of God, for without God, who can eat and find enjoyment? I think some of us naturally, and I asked this myself when I was reading this, I thought to myself, wait, is he saying to enjoy life? Because I thought he just said it's meaningless. So how can I enjoy something that's meaningless? And I would say this, and here's the whole summary of this passage, but I would say actually the whole book. You can enjoy things if this one condition is met. You can enjoy the things on this side of eternity, on this planet, if one condition is met. And the condition is this: if you see them as a gift. If you see them as a gift and not a gain. The key to living a meaningful and joyful life is to experience life as a gift and not as a gain. Now, what you say, what is the difference? When you put it up there, I just put on the words there. Experience life as a gift, not a gain. And what's the difference? Well, when we try to gain something, what you're doing is actually reshaping something into something it is not meant to be. That's how I would define gain. It is a form of control. We make work something it is not meant to be. We make work our identity, for example. We make our relationships something they're not meant to be. I teach this all the time in the premarital class, but I say, if you treat your spouse as something that will make you complete and whole, and you put all your dreams and hopes into your spouse, think of the unrealistic pressure and expectation that puts on them. No human being can bear that kind of weight. And that's why anybody who has those expectations put on them, they're going to crumble. And they're going to be broken at the end of their lives. Solomon is saying, when we do this, when we do these kind of things, that's when life becomes futile. Because I'll tell you, most of us look at our lives like the way we look at this balloon. We just hope this balloon will last forever. So we keep, keeping it, we protect it. You put a coat of something over it to protect it. You keep on injecting with helium so that it never deflates. We do everything in our power so that does not happen to us. We're just hoping and praying and begging God that this balloon will not pop. It does not burst. But Solomon says that is not the way to live life. In fact, what you should do is this. You should treat things on this planet as a gift. Now, when you think of a gift, what do you think of? Well, you think, number one, when you have a gift, you receive it as it is. So when someone gives you a phone, a nice Samsung, iPhone, whatever it is, you don't use it as a Frisbee. Okay? The person who will give it to you, if they caught you using it as Frisbee, they'll say, that's ridiculous. I shouldn't have given you that gift. You're misusing that gift. You don't try to reshape or control it. Solomon says time and time again, by the way, in this book, to enjoy life, to enjoy your spouse, to eat and drink and be happy. He says that at least 5 times throughout the course of this book, and you're going to see it later. He's saying enjoy them as they're meant to be enjoyed. And C.S. Lewis, who was a theologian and a writer, he actually said this famously. He said, the problem is not that we desire too much, it's we desire too little. When we desire the things of this earth and ask them to deliver what they simply cannot deliver, Lewis would say we're desiring too little. And when we desire too little, we get frustrated. We're forever frustrated. See, Solomon's point is you have to find your identity in God, with God. Keep God in the picture. Because if you find your joy and your hope and your identity in Jesus, in God, then you could simply enjoy things as they are. Because why? Because your deepest and biggest desires are already met in Christ. And that changes everything. It reframes how you think about the world. Because most of us go through life, and life is not perfect, right? I mean, you'll say things like this to me and to other people. You complain, and you said in your mind, you say, work sucks. I hate work. It's so mundane. I really don't like it. Or you say, oh, man, I hate being stuck in this long line at the grocery store. Or on my street, perpetually on Steeles, it's always plugged up. And I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. Why am I stuck here? I mean, don't we have so much land in Canada? I'm always complaining about that, right? Or when someone cuts you off in traffic, you just pray that their car will be there will be poetic justice. Right? God is going to vindicate me. And that there will be instant justice and I can capture on a camera, right? I mean, we think of things like that. But I think Solomon is saying this. He's saying, look, you need to know that those things that I just listed are expected. Like, why are you expecting them to be any different? This is, the things that I just talked about, these are gifts. But the world is also broken and fractured. So I would say this, enjoy those things, but do not put your hope in them. You see, there's a difference there. You put your hope in them, there's a different story. I would say this is how I would land this sermon. The word I would choose to end this is an older word, but it encapsulates it. It's stewardship. The critical word here is stewardship. Stewardship is when we steward a gift, we use that gift and enjoy it properly. It's a gift to us. It's given. We didn't earn this gift, right? The things that we have, we didn't earn those. God gave those to us as gifts. So what are we? We're to steward them. We're not going to have these gifts forever, right? Death is a great equalizer. We won't have it. So steward them while you can and use it properly. Do not abuse the gift. Do not make it into something that it's not. What do you do with the gift? You simply thank God for the gift. And you don't compare. You don't say, God, how come that person got that gift? How come that person got that gift? I didn't get those gifts. You simply think, thank you, Lord, for the gifts that I have been given. You're content with what God has given you personally. And here's the kicker, and here's the part no one wants to hear, but it's true. If and when these gifts are taken away, we mourn, but we do not let that destroy us. We don't try to master it, and we don't try to let the gift master us. We don't try to master it, or let it master us. Right? There's a difference between giver and gift. We need to make that distinction. So number one, I would say in stewardship, you use a gift and enjoy it properly, and you don't abuse it and you're content. Number two, I would say slow down and just enjoy the gift as it is. And what I mean by slow down is our culture is obsessed with speed and hurry and quickness. And when we have a meal, sometimes it's just engulf the food and to move on to the next thing. But just enjoy the time and experience for what it is. I mean, I see, sometimes you go to restaurants. I don't want to mention what kind of restaurants, but go to these restaurants, and you see two people that are just eating to survive. Because why? Because they sit down, and I just saw this the other day. I was kind of observing them kind of casually, like this. But they just pull out their phone. One person pulls out their phone. They actually brought a stand with them, a stand. The other person pulls out their phone or an iPad, puts it down, and there literally was no discussion or conversation for the entire meal. The only thing they said was, Bill. I'm serious. You think I'm making this stuff up, but I'm not. Right? Just enjoy the meal. Enjoy the people, because it's God's gift to you. Right? It's God's gift to you. Experience for when you go and see a sunset. And I know it sounds romantic and cheesy, and all the husbands are like, why are you saying this? Just soak it up, okay? Don't do this. Sunset. Don't do that. Just enjoy it. Take one photo, okay? One photo, one selfie. But don't have to post it online and Insta story it and send it to your family on WhatsApp. Here's the sunset, and like 10 photos of the sunset. Just enjoy the sunset and say, thank you, God, for light. Right? Don't think about the next vacation. Oh boy, this sunset is not as good as the one I saw in Hawaii. Right? Like, don't do that. When you go to work, this is hard, but thank God for the opportunity to provide for your family. I know it's mundane. I know it's tiresome. It's repetitive. Some of you are like, oh, I'm understaffed. I'm underpaid. We have to expect that sometimes life is like that because the world is broken. So slow down and enjoy what you can because it's a gift. You can only steward it for so long. Never take it for granted. Number three, I would say this. Stewardship means you're responsible to God. Because when you're given a gift, God is going to ask at the end of your life, provide me account of how you stewarded this gift. Did you abuse it? Did you throw it in the trash? I mean, God's going to ask us questions like, were you grateful? Were you grateful and thankful for the gifts that I gave you? Did you use your gifts to bless other people? Just hog it for yourself? God is going to ask, were you faithful and generous to these gifts? Were you praising your Creator and the giver of the gifts? Or are you just elevating these gifts to a position where they just should not occupy in your heart? That's what I would say. Steward your gifts correctly. And I think that's Solomon's conclusion here. This is too is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? And that's a key, with or without God. And that's what I want to leave you with. Let's just bow our heads, and we have a song we're going to sing that we were introducing. We just sang earlier called Let It Be Jesus, and I think the words really do speak to us. But before we sing that song, let me just, as you bow your heads, just think of, I think it's good to do a spiritual life inventory. And what I mean by that is, think about all the things in your life. The things that are, these balloons. Think of these balloons that are just in your life. They're gifts. They're to be enjoyed. But are we using them as something to gain, or are they really, truly gifts to be enjoyed and used correctly? And I just want to leave you with that thought as we end today and as we sing the next song.